At 30,000 feet, the horizon usually offers a sense of infinite connection, a grid of lights and landscapes that tie the world together. But as an aircraft approaches the southernmost latitudes, that connection begins to fray. The horizon vanishes into a seamless, blinding blur of sky and ice, and the laws of standard navigation start to stutter. You are looking at the most restricted airspace on the planet, a region where international diplomacy and the raw forces of physics converge into a singular, chilling void. This is the Antarctic no-fly zone, a boundary defined not by walls or fences, but by a quiet, collective agreement among the world's most powerful nations to keep the heart of the frozen continent hidden from the wandering eye. The silence here is not an absence of sound, it is a presence of something forbidden. To the casual observer, the reason commercial flights avoid the South Pole is a matter of simple, grounded logistics. There are no runways for emergency landings, the weather can shift from a calm crystal day to a deadly whiteout in seconds, and the extreme cold threatens to jellify standard jet fuel. These are the practical truths we are taught to accept, and they are rooted in undeniable physical reality. Yet, for those who study the global flight paths of the southern hemisphere, a curious pattern emerges. While planes routinely traverse the vast, lonely stretches of the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, the path over the Antarctic interior remains an absolute vacuum. It is a gap in the global network, a place where the grid of human civilization simply ends. If this were merely a matter of safety, one might expect the occasional government-sanctioned survey or an adventurous high-altitude route, yet the restrictions remain absolute, guarded by a treaty that is as rigid as the ice itself. The mystery of this isolation deepens when one considers historical anomalies that suggest this continent was not always a hidden wasteland. Long before modern satellites mapped every inch of the globe, ancient charts like the Piri Reis map depicted a coastline that bears a striking resemblance to the Antarctic shore. Mainstream scholars often interpret this as a distorted rendering of the South American coast, yet others point to the uncanny accuracy of features that align with the landmass as it exists beneath the ice. This creates a friction in our understanding of time. How could the shape of a continent, supposedly buried under miles of frozen weight for millions of years, be recorded with such precision? This inconsistency serves as the foundation for a much darker inquiry, suggesting that the no-fly status is perhaps protecting a history we are not yet ready to reclaim, or a reality that contradicts the linear progression of human civilization. In recent decades, the advent of ice-penetrating radar has allowed us to peer through the crystalline shield that covers the continent, and the results are hauntingly precise. Deep beneath the permafrost, radar has picked up massive, geometric structures, some stretching for miles, that defy the chaotic patterns of natural rock formations. These are not merely mountains, they are shapes that suggest intent and design, echoes of a geometry that shouldn't exist in a place where human life has never officially flourished. The data points to vast hollows and dense concentrations of matter that suggest the remnants of something structural, or perhaps a facility of unknown origin. While official reports often categorize these as tectonic rifts or magnetic provinces, the symmetry of the data invites more questions than it answers, leaving a sense of a structured emptiness waiting to be explained. Among the most debated findings are the magnetic anomalies, pockets of intense energy that disrupt instruments and create localized shifts in the gravitational field. Pilots who have skirted the edges of the restricted zones occasionally report strange visual phenomena that challenge the limits of optical physics. They describe pillars of light extending from the ice into the upper atmosphere, or shimmering distortions in the air that resemble heat haze in the middle of a sub-zero desert. While science attributes these to ice crystals and solar wind, the persistence of these sightings near the most restricted sectors fuels a growing sense that the ice is concealing a technology or a natural phenomenon that exists outside our current understanding of energy. It is as if the continent itself is a conductor for forces we have yet to name. The international community's reaction to these mysteries is perhaps the most telling piece of the puzzle. The Antarctic Treaty, signed during the height of the Cold War, remains a rare and anomalous example of global cooperation. It mandates that the continent be used only for peaceful, scientific purposes, yet the reality on the ground is one of heavy surveillance and restricted access. Why, during a period when the world's superpowers were on the brink of nuclear conflict, did they agree to halt all competition at the edge of the ice? Scientific outposts are often located with suspicious precision near these radar anomalies, and the movement of personnel is strictly monitored. It is a continent where the world's superpowers have agreed to stop competing and start guarding. The question remains, are they protecting a delicate ecosystem, or are they acting as sentries for a secret that is too volatile to be shared with the public? Consider the immense logistical effort required to maintain this silence. The no-fly status is enforced not just by a lack of infrastructure, but by a sophisticated network of monitoring stations that track any unauthorized entry into the interior. When a private expedition or an independent pilot attempts to cross deep into the restricted zones, they are met with administrative hurdles that are nearly impossible to clear, or physical interceptions that are rarely publicized. This level of control over a supposedly uninhabited wasteland suggests that the stakes are higher than environmental preservation. There is a tension in the air at the southern edge of the world, a feeling that we are standing on the threshold of a door that has been intentionally locked from the inside, and those who hold the keys are not eager to open it. As our technology improves, the veil over the Antarctic begins to thin, but the resistance to transparency remains high. High-resolution satellite imagery occasionally captures glimpses of things that aren't supposed to be there, heat signatures rising from deep within the ice, or dark openings that lead into subterranean labyrinths. These images are often labeled as glitches, sensor artifacts, or data corruptions, yet they persist in the fringes of the digital world. The discrepancy between what we are told and what we can see creates a friction that cannot be ignored. The continent is no longer just a place of ice, it is a landscape of shadows, a repository for the world's most uncomfortable questions. Every censored frame of satellite data adds another layer to the wall of secrecy, making the no-fly zone feel less like a safety precaution and more like a curtain drawn over a stage. The theory of energy anomalies or space-time distortions in the Antarctic is often dismissed as fantasy, yet the physical evidence of high-energy bursts originating from the ground up cannot be easily brushed aside. Modern particle detectors at the South Pole, such as the IceCube project, have recorded upward-going neutrinos, particles that seem to be traveling through the Earth and erupting out of the ice. While physicists search for a natural explanation in the realm of high-energy astrophysics, the timing and location of these bursts often coincide with the very areas marked as off-limits to aviation. It is as if the continent itself is breathing, emitting pulses of energy that suggest a core that is far from dormant. These pulses ripple through the global magnetic field, suggesting that whatever is happening at the pole has an influence that extends far beyond the frozen horizon. This leads us to the heart of the conflict, the clash between our modern understanding of the world and the reality of what lies at the poles. If there are indeed structures or energy sources beneath the ice, their existence would require us to rewrite every textbook on human history and planetary science. The reluctance of official institutions to engage with these anomalies isn't necessarily a sign of a conspiracy, but perhaps a symptom of institutional fear. To acknowledge that there is something inexplicable at the South Pole is to admit that we do not have full sovereignty over our own planet. The no-fly zone becomes a buffer, a way to keep the public's gaze fixed on the horizon rather than the mysteries beneath their feet. It is an intellectual quarantine, designed to keep the status quo intact. The psychological impact of the Antarctic void is profound. It is the last great frontier, a place that resists colonization and mapping. In a world where every square inch of the surface is indexed by search engines and surveillance, the South Pole remains a blind spot. This blank space on the map acts as a mirror for our collective anxieties. We wonder if we are being watched from the ice, or if we are watching over something that should never have been disturbed. The isolation of the continent creates a sense of profound loneliness, but also a terrifying sense of proximity to something ancient and powerful. It is the only place on Earth where the human presence feels like a temporary intrusion, permitted only so long as we do not look too closely. We must also look at the role of private interests and corporate entities that have recently taken an interest in the region. There are whispers of elite tourism where the ultra-wealthy are taken to locations that do not appear on any public itinerary. These private excursions, often shielded by non-disclosure agreements and extreme security, suggest that the no-fly rules might be flexible for those with enough influence. If the continent is a restricted scientific preserve, why are there reports of luxury facilities hidden in the mountain ranges? The contradiction between the public's restricted access and the private movements of the global elite only serves to heighten the suspicion that the ice is a stage for a drama we are not invited to watch. It suggests a dual reality, one for the masses, and another for those who can afford the truth. The radar data continues to pour in, revealing more than just the topography of the land. It reveals a complex network of tunnels and chambers that circulate liquid water miles below the surface. Some of these lakes, like Lake Vostok, have been sealed off from the rest of the world for millions of years. When scientists finally breached the surface of these lakes, they found microbial life forms that don't match anything else on Earth. If the biology is different, could the history be different as well? Could these subterranean voids be the home to the structures suggested by the radar? The possibility that a parallel ecosystem or a parallel history exists beneath the ice is no longer the stuff of fiction. It is a legitimate inquiry that is being conducted behind closed doors, away from the prying eyes of the global public. As we move further into the 21st century, the pressure to open the Antarctic is mounting. Climate change is melting the ice at an unprecedented rate, slowly pulling back the white sheet to reveal the secrets beneath. Each year, new islands appear, and stretches of land are exposed for the first time in human history. With the receding ice, the no-fly zones become harder to justify. If the structures beneath the ice start to emerge into the sunlight, the international community will have to decide whether to continue the silence or to face the reality of what they have been guarding. The risk of discovery is becoming greater than the risk of the unknown. We are in a race against time, as the very climate we are struggling to stabilize threatens to unveil the very things we have spent decades trying to hide. The conflict of the Antarctic is a conflict of narratives. One narrative tells us it is a frozen desert, essential for climate regulation and scientific study. The other narrative, written in radar pings and magnetic anomalies, suggests it is a controlled environment, a site of ancient significance and modern secrecy. The truth likely lies somewhere in the middle, in the gray area between natural wonder and anomalous reality. But as long as the flight paths remain diverted and the satellite images remain censored, the heart of the continent will continue to be a source of dark fascination. It is the ultimate cliffhanger in the story of our planet, a mystery that grows deeper with every attempt to ignore it. When you look at a map of the world, your eyes usually settle on the continents where we live, work, and build. The poles are often relegated to the edges, near borders of the known world. But if you were to tilt that map, to place the South Pole at the center, you would see a different reality. You would see a central hub, a point around which all other landmasses rotate, guarded by a ring of ice and a wall of silence. You would realize that the no-fly zone isn't just a safety precaution, it is a boundary marking the limit of our permitted knowledge. It is the edge of the map where the ink runs dry and the questions begin. The frozen silence of the South remains the ultimate thriller. It is a story with no clear protagonist, only a setting that seems to actively resist our presence. The gates that radar suggests, the maps that predate the ice, and the treaties that enforce the void all point to a singular conclusion: we are not alone in our history. There is something older, something colder, and something much more complex than our modern world is willing to admit. Until the day the restrictions are lifted and the ice finally gives up its ghosts, we can only stare at the white void and wonder what is looking back. The ice does not keep secrets, it preserves them, waiting for the moment when the world is ready, or forced, to see. The Antarctic is not just a place, it is a question. It challenges our understanding of the Earth, our history, and our place in the cosmos. Every flight that turns away, every radar scan that is classified, and every ancient map that shows a green continent where there should be ice adds another layer to the mystery. We are standing on the edge of a great discovery, or perhaps a great forgetting. Either way, the no-fly zone remains the most significant boundary on the planet, not because of what it keeps out, but because of what it keeps in. It is a testament to the fact that even in an age of total information, there are still places where the light does not reach. In the end, the dark thriller of the Antarctic is the realization that the world is much larger and more mysterious than our screens and sensors lead us to believe. The ice is a vault, and we are only just beginning to find the keys. Whether those keys lead to a lost civilization, a natural anomaly, or a gate to somewhere else entirely, the journey to the heart of the ice is the ultimate human endeavor. But for now, the planes will continue to circle, the satellites will continue to watch, and the silence of the South Pole will remain unbroken, a cold reminder that some secrets are meant to stay frozen. If you had the chance to fly over that forbidden line, to see what lies at the center of the white void, would you take it, or would you prefer the comfort of the silence? The ice is melting, and soon, the world may not have a choice but to look.